So my number one movie that shaped my love of watching films in a group is The Room from 2003. This is written and directed by Tommy Wiseau, also starring Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero, the IMDb plot summary. In San Francisco, an amiable banker's seemingly perfect life is turned upside down when his deceitful fiance embarks on an affair with his best friend. So, if folks haven't heard of this movie before, it's a very famous, terrible movie. It's basically an independent film by, again, written, directed, and starring Tommy Wiseau, this very interesting character from some unknown foreign country that he still doesn't really talk about. He's got some weird accent that no one can figure out. And he made this movie in San Francisco with basically like people that he knew. And it's very, very terrible. It's like a Plan 9 from Outer Space type of bad movie, or Troll 2, one of those famous, really bad movies. And for me, what I like about this movie and what it represents to me in terms of watching films with other people is bad movies, which is something I really enjoy. And in a later episode, we'll dive more into that. I love bad movies, but it's more about the experience of sharing a bad movie with somebody else or having them be like, oh my God, this is so terrible. You have to watch this. So it almost feels kind of like a secret sometimes, like, oh, I know this thing that like no one else might know about because this movie's so bad, but it's so enjoyable and how bad it is. So let me kind of share it around, which is how I discovered this film. My roommate at the time was like, oh my God, you haven't seen The Room yet? You got to watch it. And, you know, he got a DVD and we watched it as a group with some other friends too together because he had seen it and a couple other members of the group had. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing I've ever seen in terms of how bad it is. And now I'm that person sort of, it's like a chain letter basically. So now I'm trying to get as many of my friends over the years to watch this. And I want to watch it with them because you want to see how the other person is reacting, which is something that you really can only get that love and that experience from a group setting. Like watching this by myself, which I did for this podcast, is still fun, but it's not as enjoyable as seeing somebody else's first time of being like, what the hell is this movie? And laughing together at how ridiculous it is. I think actually the first time you saw this movie was with me, right?
Yeah. Although I don't know if we saw the whole thing. Did
yeah,
we?
you couldn't. You were like, I can't finish this, or we ran out of. I think we were trying to watch it after we saw the film The Disaster Artist, which is a dramatization of the making of this film that came out a couple of years ago. So I think we had done that, and then we're trying to back to back, and it got too late or something. And
right.
So I enjoyed taking this movie to you and be like, you got to watch this, and just seeing your reaction of it. So yeah, like, do you have the same relationship with bad movies in that sense, or just being able to share the experience of something you know you love with somebody else? And then what were your thoughts in this film?
Yeah. No, I know you enjoy that, and it was fun to kind of watch it with you in that sense. But I'm not a big bad movie kind of person per se, because if it's not good and I can't even watch it, then I don't want to watch it because I would rather watch something that I actually like. That said, though, there is a specific kind of it's so bad it's good sort of thing.
Right.
But I don't know. For me, there has to be some redeeming quality, and that may not even be in the movie itself, but it could be just about the act of making it, and the belief that you have that you can actually put this together and you think it's good. There has to be something else that propels me through it. Otherwise, if it's just bad, like laughing at something gets sort of tired a little bit pretty soon for me. So that's why I'm never that into it. Although this one, I totally get it because it's just so outlandish. In addition to being bad, it's so bizarre because things just come at you out of left field. And I think there's almost like, I don't know, there's like a shock value in that sense exactly. Of like, wait, definitely. What just happened? What just happened? And I think that's sort of, it's not even bad. I mean, it is bad, but it's less about that, but more about the shock value of it. And I totally see that if a bunch of us like got together and watched it together, it would be pretty fun. But as you've witnessed, like I couldn't watch too much of this.
Right. Yeah, the joke kind of the joke, but like the shock value of how bad this is, it gets wore thin on you pretty fast. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think you hit the nail on the head though for me, and again, we'll get more into this in a future episode around why I love really bad movies. But there's a difference between a movie that was meant to be good by the filmmakers and turned out to be absolutely garbage versus what we've kind of fallen into now in the last 10 years with these like the Sharknadoes and the You know, these movies that are purposely supposed to be bad, to me,
Right.
that's not entertaining or interesting because you're trying to make a movie that's bad and you sort of, I can see the desire and like, we're going to make this
Right.
movie bad. Or like Snakes on a Plane is another example of that. Or
Right.
Cocaine Bear, one of the worst movies I've ever seen,
Never
was
seen it.
earlier this year. I love it when like Tommy Wiseau, who wrote and directed this, he's thinking he's making Citizen Kane.
Right.
And this
Or
actually is a
Rebel Without a
movie,
Cause.
right? And but this movie is completely the writing's bad, the acting's bad, the directing's bad, the editing is bad. There's a whole sequence that takes place on a rooftop that they very easily could have filmed this on a real rooftop in San Francisco. There's a lot of scenes that they filmed around San Francisco. Very cheap to do that. Instead, he builds this entire fake rooftop on a set for some reason, puts a bunch of green screen around for some reason, and then recreates the skyline of San Francisco for no, like, there's literally no reason for you to ever do this. But he did all those things, and that's what makes this movie bad. But he thought it was the right thing to do. So
Right.
that is where I love the bad movies where the intention was not to make a bad movie. It was to make something they thought was good, and either their talent wasn't there, or just sometimes things don't come together and the result is terrible. And this one, the mystery behind it too, of like, who is Tommy Wiseau? Why did he do this? What
Right.
is going on here? Like all of that piece, which makes this one especially unique to me. And also it was a running thing in LA too. For a while, this movie was advertised on a billboard on Highland. And I'd seen it
Right.
for several years. And it would just be like The Room. It was just playing in like one theater in LA for the longest time, of sort of like a the midnight crowd, like a Rocky Horror type thing, which is a famous, for folks who don't get the reference, which I guess I already made this earlier in the episode, but there's a Rocky Horror Picture Show, a movie from the 70s that is sort of a musical, like a
Right.
very glam musical that became a cult classic that shows at midnight screenings all around the world, actually, where the audience goes and interacts with the film. So The Room was essentially being like Rocky Horror here in LA. And I've always been kind of curious about it, but until my friend forced me to watch it in that group setting. Again, I think that was what was so important. You don't get the joke, I think, unless there's people
No.
around you. It just really does lay bare the fact that, yeah, this movie's so bad. It's so bad and just bizarre more than bad. It's just bizarre.
It's just bizarre. And you're right. I think there's something very experiential and communal in that. And that's why this movie has kind of, gained a cult following, because the people who watched it, they watched it with their friends and other groups of people. So, but yeah, on the point of like, he thinks he's doing something good, I think there is something admirable about that.
There definitely is.
And there's something about sort of the power of movies and how seductive this act can be, that you, I don't know, watched the making of a certain movie and you said that, oh, if I ever get to do this, I'm going to make my own set.
Right.
Even though even if it makes no sense for you to do so.
Right.
That's the thing you fell in love with. That was part of your dream mood board, I suppose, that you're going to do this when you make a movie. And there's something to root for about that. And I think I need a little bit of that, to make like a bad, bizarre endeavor, resonate in some way, that they actually wanted to make something good.
Right. Or it's not some sort of soulless kind of cash grab thing. Like you'll watch a Transformers movie and it's expensive, but that movie also is bad. But there's not only, maybe they intended even to make something good, but it was very clearly for the money.
Right.
And a lot of these other movies, like The Room, I think this movie was way more successful than Tommy Wiseau ever to possibly imagine. I'm sure he made a lot of more money from it than he thought, but he wasn't going into it for the money. He clearly just wanted to be a filmmaker, and he has no talent. And that's what we get. We get The Room, and it's still enjoyable, and I love watching it, but it's a different thing. I think I agree with you. I need that flavor of like, hey, this person wanted to make something good for the right reasons because they want to be a filmmaker, and they just didn't have the talent, and it just comes up with a weird mess. I mean, honestly, it's really hard for me to describe this movie to listeners who've never seen it or even heard of it. It is sort of like you have to see it to believe it.
Right.
It is something that you can't really, that plot summary is kind of what it's about, but not really. And it's some very weird drama that's overly dramatic, but it's really cheesy, and it's so awkward, and great quotable lines in it too, because of how badly they're written and delivered. The famous, "You're tearing me apart, Lisa." Right. Maybe folks have heard that before, but it's a movie I recommend you definitely see, but you find someone who already loves it and have them show it to you. That's the idea. Or go to like a midnight show where you can get those obsessive fans there too. But don't try to just rent this off Amazon and sit there alone and feel like you're going to get the real experience. You're going to be like, what the hell is this? As opposed to what the hell is this, and laughing at it as you would in a group. And that's the power of how a group can transform a movie watching experience, at least for me with this type of movie.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Also, editing, like, how is this movie cobbled together?
Oh my
It's
God.
just, it's like an alien made this movie,
100%.
right? Like, this
100%.
is not,
Yes.
it's not coherent
Hmm. Yeah.
whatsoever.
It makes no the different, like, he does establishing shots for no reason. He's shooting things where, like, we don't need this for the point of the story. I mean, my favorite scene, I think, in the movie, is, you can actually find this on YouTube if you want to get a sense of what this movie is. It's just him going to a flower shop to buy some
Oh.
flowers. It's maybe like 45 seconds, but it's the most bizarrely edited thing and acted. And there's like it's like, hey, doggy. It's watch that, and if you think that is amazing, then I definitely recommend checking out the movie. But yeah, it's such an odd, it does feel like an alien, and that's what Tommy Wiseau is also, that cult of personality around him now. Like, who was this guy? Why did he make this
Yeah,
thing? Is the accent even real? There's all these rumors kind of flying around about his background, but it's what makes the movie interesting, you know? And then hearing
it
that one
does.
too, and that was what my friend was telling me when I was sitting down and watching. Like, oh, I got to tell you all this stuff about this movie first. So they're able to fill you in on the backstory of this before you
Right.
then see it, to kind of set the stage. And that's another thing, that watching it by yourself, you really wouldn't get that that
No.
backstory, which is why it's so important to watch movies in a group. I think that's the way that they're meant to be experienced. Though, again, I've seen
Yeah.
tons of movies by myself, and you can get a lot out of it, like you said, that contemplative side of things too. But I think movies are it's a social art form.
Couldn't agree more.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.